Welcome to a new episode of Cheaters Always Cheat. Like, subscribe, and share to stay connected.
I'm currently in a difficult situation and I'm feeling uncertain about the decisions I'm making. This is my first time posting here, so please forgive me if I miss any important details or if my post isn't as clear as it could be. I really appreciate any advice or insights you can offer, and feel free to ask for more information if needed. I'd like to share my current circumstances with you. I'm a 25-year-old male, and I've been in a relationship with my wife, who is 27 years old, for about 8.5 years. Our relationship started when we were quite young, and we've grown a lot together over the years. Last August, while we were on a memorable trip to the USA, I decided it was the perfect time to propose to her, and thankfully, she said yes. Following the proposal, we spent some time planning our wedding. We legally got married 10 weeks ago, which was a very special moment for both of us. Then, 5 weeks ago, we had a beautiful church ceremony where we celebrated our marriage with our family and friends. It was a joyous occasion filled with love and happiness. 2 weeks after our church ceremony, we went on our honeymoon. We were both looking forward to this trip as a time to relax and enjoy each other's company after all the wedding planning and celebrations. However, during our honeymoon, I began to notice something unusual that I hadn't seen before. My wife was constantly on her phone, texting someone. This in itself might not have been too concerning, but what made it odd was that she seemed to be very secretive about it. Whenever I glanced at her phone to see who she was talking to, she would quickly hide the screen or turn off the display. This behavior struck me as unusual and has left me feeling uneasy. So here I am, feeling unsure about what to do next. I don't know if my concerns are justified or if I'm overthinking things. I'm hoping to get some perspective and advice on how to handle this situation. Thank you for taking the time to read my post, and I look forward to any guidance you can provide. When I asked her who she was texting, she explained that she was messaging her friends or her sister. At first, I wanted to believe her, but her behavior made me increasingly suspicious. She was always quick to hide her phone or turn off the screen whenever I glanced at it. This secrecy made me uneasy, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. As our honeymoon progressed, my suspicions grew. By the beginning of the second week, my unease had reached a point where I felt I had to take action. One night, while she was asleep, I decided to check her phone. This was something I had never done before. Throughout our relationship, I had always trusted her implicitly and never felt the need to invade her privacy. What I discovered left me utterly shocked and heartbroken. The woman I had loved and trusted, the one I had just married a month earlier, was cheating on me. I found messages that revealed she was involved with another man, a 39-year-old who worked as a cook at her workplace. This meant they saw each other every day during the week, which made the betrayal even more painful. Despite the overwhelming emotions I felt, I realized that we still had several days left on our honeymoon and a flight home at the end of the week. I made the difficult decision not to confront her immediately. I didn't want to create a scene or have a major argument in the middle of what was supposed to be a special and joyful time for us. The rest of the honeymoon was incredibly hard for me. Every time I saw her texting, every moment we spent together, I was tormented by the knowledge of her betrayal. I kept my feelings bottled up, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy. I still don't know how I managed to hold it all in and not let her know that I had discovered her secret. The internal struggle was immense, and even now, I'm grappling with the pain and confusion that this situation has caused me. After we returned home, I decided to dig deeper into the situation. I needed to know more about what had been happening behind my back. Through further investigation, I discovered that their relationship had actually started at the end of November last year. This was quite a shock to me because it was after our engagement but well before our wedding. I kept wondering why she didn't tell me about this affair when she had the chance. If she had been honest with me, we could have canceled the wedding and avoided all this pain. I felt completely blindsided by this revelation. Somehow, I didn't notice any signs of her affair until it was too late. I haven't talked to my wife about what I found out yet, so she doesn't know that I am aware of her affair. However, I suspect that she might sense something is off, or that I am suspicious about her behavior. Despite my inner turmoil, I've tried to keep up appearances and not let on that I know. We still have several tasks to complete that are related to our wedding. We need to select our wedding photos for the album and write thank you letters for all the gifts we received. This is part of the reason why I haven't brought up this issue yet. I thought it would be better to finish these tasks before confronting her, but the weight of what I know is becoming unbearable. Inside, I am feeling deeply tormented and conflicted. I realize that I cannot keep this to myself much longer. I need to address this situation and find a way to move forward. Right now, I'm looking into the legal aspects of our predicament. I want to know if I can legally remove her from our house. We rented it together, and both of our names are on the lease. This makes the situation more complicated. Additionally, I'm researching whether our marriage can be annulled or if I will need to go through a divorce process. The more I think about it, the more overwhelmed I feel. This betrayal has left me feeling confused, hurt, and unsure of what to do next. I know that I can't ignore it any longer, and I need to figure out the best way to move forward, both legally and emotionally. It's a challenging situation, and I feel like I'm at a crossroads, trying to find the right path to take. Here's an important detail about the other man involved. He is currently separated from his wife and has 2 teenage children. He isn't getting a divorce right now because they have some outstanding loans that they need to repay. From what I've discovered, he and my wife frequently express their love for each other and a strong desire to be together fully, but they can't make that happen at the moment due to their respective circumstances. Their plan, as far as I understand, is quite elaborate and deeply troubling. It involves my wife having children with me since the other man already has children of his own. The idea is that she and I would have kids together, and then, once the other man's situation changes, whether he gets divorced or resolves his financial issues, they would pursue a relationship together. This means they are essentially using me as part of their long-term plan, which is incredibly hurtful and difficult to accept. I'm facing a serious dilemma that has been weighing heavily on my mind. On one hand, I feel a deep sense of guilt about even thinking of getting a divorce less than 2 months after our wedding. We had a big celebration, shared wonderful moments with our family and friends, and received many gifts from our loved ones. It feels like I'm letting everyone down, not just myself, if I decide to end our marriage so soon. However, the reality is that I can't continue living like this. The constant feeling of betrayal and hurt is too much to bear. Knowing that my wife has been unfaithful and has plans to leave me for another man once it's convenient for them is something I can't ignore. I'm stuck between feeling guilty for wanting a divorce and knowing that staying in this marriage would only lead to more pain and heartache for me. I'm not exactly sure what I'm expecting from sharing this here. Maybe I'm just looking for some confirmation that I'm making the right decision by considering leaving her and seeking a divorce. I need to hear from others who might have gone through something similar or who can offer some perspective on my situation. Any advice or insights you can provide would be greatly appreciated. I'm feeling lost and need some direction on how to proceed from here. Best regards. Update. Today, I'm planning to speak with our office lawyer to see if they can provide any information or advice on this matter. If they don't have the answers I need, I'll contact a specific lawyer who specializes in family law to get some guidance on how to move forward. I need to understand my options regarding our living situation and the potential for annulment or divorce. Regarding our financial situation, neither of us is wealthy, but we're both doing okay. This adds another layer of complexity to the situation, as we need to figure out how to handle our shared finances and the lease on our rented home. Both of our names are on the lease, which makes the process even more complicated. Thank you in advance for any help, support, or advice you can offer. I'm really struggling with this and need all the guidance I can get. If she worked full-time like I do, she would actually earn more than me. Currently, she works 75% of a full-time schedule due to restrictions imposed by her employer. On the financial side, my parents are fairly well off, though not excessively wealthy. They fall into the upper middle class category. One key point is that everything I owned before our marriage remains mine, and everything she owned before our marriage remains hers. Anything we have acquired or purchased since our marriage will need to be divided between us. Additionally, she won't inherit anything from my parents because that inheritance is designated solely for me, a fact that was established well before we got married. Update 1. I took the step of discussing the matter with the lawyer in our office. Unfortunately, they don't have much expertise in this specific area. However, they were helpful enough to provide me with the contact information for a specialist who should be able to assist me with my situation. I am planning to call this new lawyer today or tomorrow to arrange a meeting as soon as possible. Once I have more information, I will keep you all updated on how things progress. I really appreciate the support from everyone during this difficult time. Update 2. I had a conversation with the new lawyer, and she mentioned that she needs to conduct some research to determine whether having another relationship is sufficient grounds for annulling the marriage. In all her years of handling divorce cases, this is the first time she has been contacted by someone so soon after getting married. She expressed her sympathy for my situation, which I found comforting. She assured me that she would look into it and inform me of the available options within a few days. I will keep you all posted once she gets back to me with more information. Update 3. I found out that I have up to 6 months from the date of our marriage to initiate an annulment. This means I have some time to explore my options and make an informed decision. I plan to speak with our priest to discuss the possibility of annulling the wedding within the church. For now, I need to focus on my upcoming school exams over the next 2 weeks. Once my exams are over, I intend to have a calm and serious discussion with my wife about everything that has been happening. One of the biggest challenges I'm facing is figuring out how to start this conversation with her without coming across too harshly. I want to avoid saying something blunt and hurtful like, "Hey, I know you're cheating on me." It's going to be a very difficult conversation, and I want to approach it as thoughtfully and calmly as possible. I'm looking for advice on how to handle this delicately and what steps I should take next. In the meantime, I continue to grapple with the complexity of our situation. If she were working full-time, our financial dynamics would be different, as she would be earning more than I do. My parents' financial status adds another layer to the situation, as they are comfortably upper middle class, but not excessively wealthy. This stability means that while I have support, the emotional toll of this situation is immense. Knowing that all my pre-marriage possessions are mine and all her pre-marriage possessions are hers helps a bit, but it's the things we've acquired together that complicate matters. Additionally, the fact that she won't inherit anything from my parents because that right is reserved for me adds another aspect to consider in this unfolding scenario. I want to thank everyone again for your support and understanding during this difficult time. Your insights and advice have been invaluable, and I will keep you updated as I learn more and decide on the best course of action. Update 4 *. I recently had a thorough discussion with our priest, and I discovered that he has the ability to initiate an annulment process for us. However, he suggested that before taking any drastic steps like jumping straight to divorce, I should have a serious conversation with my wife about the situation. He believes it's important to give her the chance to decide whether she wants to stay in the marriage or not. This advice puts me in a difficult position because I am uncertain about giving her that choice. The trust between us has been severely damaged, and I don't know if I can ever rebuild it. The hardest part for me is figuring out how to start this conversation with her. I know that there's no perfect moment to bring up such a painful topic, but I hope to find some guidance on the best way to approach it. What should I say to her? What should I avoid saying? The priest advised me not to focus on her faults. Instead, he suggested that I should express how deeply hurt I am and how much strain this situation has put on our marriage. He also recommended that I avoid bringing up the topic of forgiveness right now. Instead, I should offer my support and let her know that I am willing to help work through this, but I need to be clear that I am aware of her infidelity. He stressed that it's important to provide enough information so she understands that I know about her cheating, but I shouldn't reveal too much all at once. The priest's guidance has been helpful, but I still feel overwhelmed by the prospect of this conversation. Given the complexity of our situation, it's probably wise to consult my lawyer again before talking to my wife. I need to understand the legal steps I should take and discuss the implications regarding the house we are renting together. The lease has both of our names on it, which complicates matters further. Only after I have a clear understanding of my legal options should I approach my wife with this difficult conversation. Hello everyone. A lot has transpired since my last post, and I wanted to share more details about my journey. Previously, I asked for advice on whether I should address the issue with my wife or proceed directly with a divorce or annulment. I provided updates regarding my conversations with a lawyer, who informed me that I have the option to request an annulment within 6 months of our marriage. However, since cheating isn't explicitly listed in the law as grounds for annulment, the lawyer couldn't guarantee a 100% success rate for the annulment. So, in the worst-case scenario, I will have to proceed with a divorce. Discussion with the priest *. I had a detailed conversation with our priest about the possibility of getting an annulment. He explained that he can initiate this process but advised me to talk to my wife first. He believes it's important for her to have a chance to decide if she wants to continue the marriage. This advice has left me feeling conflicted because of the deep mistrust I now feel towards her. Nonetheless, the priest emphasized the importance of expressing my feelings rather than blaming her directly. Approaching the conversation *. The priest advised me to focus on sharing my emotions. I should let her know how deeply hurt I am and explain how much strain this situation has put on our marriage. He recommended that I avoid discussing forgiveness at this point and instead offer my support. It's crucial to give her enough information so she understands that I am aware of her affair, but I should be careful not to overwhelm her with too many details at once. This approach seems more compassionate, but it doesn't make the task any less daunting. Legal consultation *. Before initiating this conversation with my wife, I plan to consult with my lawyer again. I need to understand all the legal steps I should take and discuss our living situation, especially since the lease for our rented house includes both our names. This adds another layer of complexity to an already challenging situation. Having a clear understanding of my legal options will hopefully give me the confidence to address this issue with my wife. Since my last post, I've been reflecting a lot on the emotional impact of this situation. The advice and support I've received from this community have been invaluable, but this remains a deeply personal and painful journey. The realization that I might need to end my marriage so soon after our wedding has been incredibly difficult to accept. The emotional turmoil I'm experiencing is compounded by the practical considerations I need to address. If my wife were working full-time, the financial dynamics between us would be different, as she would be earning more than I do. My parents' financial status, while helpful, adds another layer of complexity. They are comfortably upper middle class, but not excessively wealthy, which provides some support but doesn't mitigate the emotional pain. Knowing that all my pre-marriage possessions are mine and all her pre-marriage possessions are hers helps a bit, but it's the things we've acquired together that complicate matters. Additionally, the fact that she won't inherit anything from my parents because that right is reserved for me adds another aspect to consider in this unfolding scenario. I want to thank everyone again for your support and understanding during this difficult time. Your insights and advice have helped me feel less alone in this challenging time. I will continue to keep you all updated as things progress. Thank you for being there and for providing such thoughtful guidance. I also consulted our priest, and from the church's perspective, I can request an annulment at any time, provided I can prove that the cheating occurred before, during, and after the marriage. Fortunately, I have all the necessary evidence to establish this. When I confided in my friends about the situation, they unanimously recommended that I ask her to leave my home immediately. Consequently, after gathering all the requisite information, I confronted my wife about this matter 3 weeks ago. Our conversation was filled with tears and some raised voices, although I managed to remain composed. We discussed a multitude of issues in the subsequent days, trying to understand the root of our problems. To address everything privately, we even spent a weekend away together. During this time, we talked extensively about what had happened. In summary, she doesn't have a clear reason for why she cheated on me, it just happened. She didn't bring it up earlier because she feared my reaction. She thought I might get angry, leave her, and go away, which raises the question of what she expected to happen when I found out after we got married. She assured me that she still loves me, so I asked her to figure out what she truly wants and what she's willing to do to salvage our marriage. Depending on her decision, I would then determine whether I wanted to give it another shot with her or not, although I was already about 90% inclined to leave her. When I spoke with our priest, he explained that from the church's perspective, I can request an annulment at any time, provided I can prove that the cheating occurred before, during, and after the marriage. Luckily, I have gathered all the necessary evidence to establish this. The priest's guidance was reassuring, knowing that I had a path forward within the church's rules. I shared my situation with my close friends, and they were unanimously supportive, advising me to ask her to leave our home immediately. Their support gave me the strength to confront my wife. After gathering all the necessary information and preparing myself emotionally, I confronted her about the affair 3 weeks ago. Our conversation was intense, filled with tears and some raised voices, but I managed to stay composed throughout. We discussed many issues in the subsequent days, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. We decided to spend a weekend away together to address everything privately, away from the daily distractions of life. During this weekend, we had deep and honest conversations. She admitted that she doesn't have a clear reason for why she cheated, it just happened. She explained that she didn't tell me earlier because she was afraid of my reaction. She feared I might get angry, leave her, and go away. This raised the question of what she thought would happen when I eventually found out after we got married. Despite everything, she assured me that she still loves me. I asked her to take some time to figure out what she truly wants and what she's willing to do to save our marriage. Based on her decision, I would then determine whether I wanted to give our relationship another chance or not. However, I must admit that I was already about 90% inclined to leave her. This entire experience has been emotionally draining, but I feel more prepared to make a decision about our future. The support from my friends, the guidance from our priest, and the time spent discussing things with my wife have all contributed to this clarity. I am still in the process of deciding what the best course of action is for my well-being and future happiness. Thank you all for your continued support and advice. From the church's perspective, I can request an annulment at any time, provided I can prove the cheating occurred before, during, and after the marriage. Luckily, I have the necessary evidence to establish this. When I consulted our priest, he explained this to me and reassured me that I had a path forward within the church's rules. Confiding in my friends was a significant step for me. They were unanimously supportive and advised me to ask her to leave our home immediately. Their support gave me the strength to confront my wife. After gathering all the necessary information and preparing myself emotionally, I confronted her about the affair 3 weeks ago. Our conversation was intense, filled with tears and raised voices, but I managed to stay composed throughout. We discussed many issues in the subsequent days, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. To address everything privately, we even spent a weekend away together. During this time, we had deep and honest conversations. She admitted she doesn't have a clear reason for why she cheated, it just happened. She explained she didn't tell me earlier because she feared my reaction. She thought I might get angry, leave her, and go away, which raises the question of what she expected to happen when I eventually found out after we got married. Despite everything, she assured me that she still loves me. I asked her to take some time to figure out what she truly wants and what she's willing to do to save our marriage. Based on her decision, I would then determine whether I wanted to give our relationship another chance or not. However, I must admit that I was already about 90% inclined to leave her. This entire experience has been emotionally draining, but I feel more prepared to make a decision about our future. The support from my friends, the guidance from our priest, and the time spent discussing things with my wife have all contributed to this clarity. I am still in the process of deciding what the best course of action is for my well-being and future happiness. Thank you all for your continued support and advice. I also consulted our priest, and from the church's perspective, I can request an annulment at any time, provided I can prove the cheating occurred before, during, and after the marriage. Fortunately, I have the necessary evidence to establish this. When I confided in my friends, they unanimously recommended I ask her to leave my home immediately. Consequently, after gathering all the requisite information, I confronted my wife about this matter 3 weeks ago. Our conversation was filled with tears and some raised voices, although I managed to remain composed. We discussed a multitude of issues in the subsequent days. To address everything privately, we even spent a weekend away together. During this time, we talked extensively about what had happened. In summary, she doesn't have a clear reason for why she cheated on me, it just happened. She didn't bring it up earlier because she feared my reaction. She thought I might get angry, leave her, and go away, which raises the question of what she expected to happen when I found out after we got married. She assured me that she still loves me, so I asked her to figure out what she truly wants and what she's willing to do to salvage our marriage. Depending on her decision, I would then determine whether I wanted to give it another shot with her or not, although I was already about 90% inclined to leave her. When I spoke with our priest, he explained from the church's perspective, I can request an annulment at any time, provided I can prove the cheating occurred before, during, and after the marriage. Luckily, I have the necessary evidence to establish this. The priest's guidance was reassuring, knowing I had a path forward within the church's rules. I shared my situation with my close friends, and they were unanimously supportive, advising me to ask her to leave our home immediately. Their support gave me the strength to confront my wife. After gathering all the necessary information and preparing myself emotionally, I confronted her about the affair 3 weeks ago. Our conversation was intense, filled with tears and some raised voices, but I managed to stay composed throughout. We discussed many issues in the subsequent days, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. We decided to spend a weekend away together to address everything privately, away from the daily distractions of life. During this weekend, we had deep and honest conversations. She admitted she doesn't have a clear reason for why she cheated, it just happened. She explained she didn't tell me earlier because she was afraid of my reaction. She feared I might get angry, leave her, and go away. This raised the question of what she thought would happen when I eventually found out after we got married. Despite everything, she assured me she still loves me. I asked her to take some time to figure out what she truly wants and what she's willing to do to save our marriage. Based on her decision, I would then determine whether I wanted to give our relationship another chance or not. However, I must admit I was already about 90% inclined to leave her. This entire experience has been emotionally draining, but I feel more prepared to make a decision about our future. The support from my friends, the guidance from our priest, and the time spent discussing things with my wife have all contributed to this clarity. I am still in the process of deciding what the best course of action is for my well-being and future happiness. Thank you all for your continued support and advice. After a week, I still hadn't received a clear answer from her about whether she wanted me or the other guy. So, I made the decision for both of us. If she couldn't choose between her husband and her lover within less than 3 months of marriage, then I could certainly decide whether I wanted to spend my life with her or not. 2 weeks ago, we both agreed to end our relationship. Unfortunately, during this whole time, she didn't ask me once to stay. While she was sad about me leaving, I think she was also happy about the prospect of pursuing a relationship with the other guy. Last week, I told my parents and brothers about the entire situation. They were all saddened by the news but understood and agreed that it's the best decision for me. On the same day, my wife also informed her parents, and they asked her to leave their home. She had to stay with some friends temporarily, but she has since rented an apartment and is in the process of moving her belongings out of my house. In 10 days, I'll be meeting with the lawyer to start the process for an annulment of our marriage. I also need to update the priest about my wife moving out and then request the annulment through the church. At this point, I'm at a loss for words. My marriage didn't even last 3 months. It seems like my wife was almost relieved to part ways, which leaves me feeling like there's not much else to say about our situation. While I acknowledge that I still need some time to heal from all of this, I'm slowly noticing improvements in my life. I'm gradually becoming accustomed to being on my own and handling all the household responsibilities by myself. Your ongoing support during this challenging time is truly appreciated. As I move forward, I understand that I need to start over with my life. Despite the pain of this experience, I hold on to hope that I will eventually find someone who genuinely loves and respects me. Thank you for being there for me through it all. Now, let me share another story with you. I'm a 22-year-old guy who has begun to harbor suspicions about something brewing between my girlfriend, Alexis, who is also 22, and my friend Derek, aged 21. The three of us, along with our mutual friend Brooke, share an apartment. Living together has its perks, but lately, I've been unable to shake off this nagging feeling that something might be amiss between Alexis and Derek. Our living situation, which initially seemed like a great idea, has now become a source of unease for me. The apartment, leased by Alexis and Brooke, is quite spacious but comes with a significant financial burden. Amidst the hustle and bustle of our daily lives, I can't help but wonder if my suspicions are valid or if I'm simply overthinking things. Initially, there were supposed to be 3 girls living here, but the third person backed out suddenly. Even though they had plans to move to a cheaper place, they had already invested a lot in this apartment and didn't want to leave. When my lease ended 6 months ago, I suggested moving in to split the rent and utilities 3 ways since I was already staying over frequently. Both girls were thrilled with the idea. Shortly before I moved in, Brooke started dating my best friend Derek, which seemed great because it meant both couples could hang out with their significant others and best friends all together. Derek began staying over more often, and when his parents recently sold their house and left town, he temporarily moved in with us. We haven't pressured him to find a new place because sharing expenses among 4 people is financially beneficial for all of us. However, it's important to note that only Alexis and Brooke are on the lease. Surprisingly, the apartment owner doesn't mind our living situation as long as the rent is paid because we're quiet. However, there have been 3 incidents that have raised suspicions for me. I want to clarify that I wouldn't make an accusation like this if it weren't for these incidents. Alexis is a sweet and shy girl, and Derek has been like a brother to me. They don't appear flirtatious, but as I mentioned earlier, all 4 of us are very close friends and spend a lot of time together. Brooke and I have early classes, so we leave by 8 a.m. Derek and Alexis have afternoon classes, so it's not unusual for them to leave together. Despite these explanations, there have been moments when I've noticed some interactions between Derek and Alexis that seem off. It's hard to put my finger on it, but their behavior has made me uneasy lately. While they usually take separate cars, one day I decided to surprise Alexis by waiting for her outside her class with lunch. I patiently watched everyone coming out of the class, but Alexis wasn't among them. I sent her a text asking where she was, and she replied, "Just go to the class, going home to study." Puzzled by her response, I tried calling her, but there was no answer, which struck me as odd since she had just texted me. She didn't respond until much later, which is unusual for her, as she's typically glued to her phone. Later that day, I ran into Brooke, who casually mentioned that Derek had stayed home sick, and she was planning to bring him some soup. At the time, I didn't think much of it. However, when I got home later that night, I noticed that Alexis's car was in the exact same spot it had been all day. Usually, she parks in the guest parking since our unit only has 3 spaces, so her car typically moves around. I asked her if she had gone to class, and she hesitated before admitting that she had skipped because she found the professor's explanations frustrating. She knows that I dislike it when she skips classes because it has affected her grades before. However, she had been doing better recently. This incident left me feeling a bit uneasy, especially considering the timing of Derek being sick and Alexis skipping class on the same day. While I was doing the dishes, I leaned over and kissed her, expressing my trust in her judgment. She reassured me, saying she probably wouldn't skip class again because being alone in the house when bored was unpleasant. We shared a laugh, and the night continued as usual. Eventually, we headed to bed, and as I lay there, almost drifting off to sleep, something struck me. She shouldn't have been alone because Derek was supposedly homesick, right? Still awake on her phone, I suddenly jolted awake and asked her where Derek was today, considering Brooke had mentioned he was homesick. She seemed taken aback by the question, perhaps because I went from half asleep to wide awake with a random inquiry. She replied that he had been here briefly in the morning but went out to run errands or something. She wasn't entirely sure. After the other incidents, I couldn't shake the feeling that her scattered response to this question seemed off, although it might just be my imagination. The second incident occurred when I went to throw some things in the kitchen garbage and noticed a rubber wrapper of the exact same brand that Alexis and I use. This discovery left me feeling uneasy, adding to the growing list of suspicions I had been harboring. The rubber wrapper wasn't very visible, tucked behind a cereal box, but its distinctive color caught my eye. It was torn, which struck me as odd since Derek always uses a different brand. Usually, we keep the wrappers in our own room's garbage cans to avoid them ending up in the kitchen. Additionally, due to exams and stress, Alexis and I hadn't been intimate in a few days. I didn't go searching for a use protection or anything, I simply returned to the room to check if some of our supplies were missing. It was hard to tell because we buy in bulk. My initial thought was that Brooke and Derek might have run out and taken from our stock without asking, which upset me. Later that night, I brought up the rubber wrapper to Alexis, and she seemed surprised when I mentioned my theory. She became unusually agitated. She's usually very calm, but she went on a rant about their invasion of our privacy. I suggested talking to them about it, but she immediately shot down the idea and made me promise not to bring it up unless they did it again. This reaction struck me as strange because we're generally open about sexual topics. However, living together might have made Alexis uncomfortable discussing it. She comes from a conservative small town and isn't as open about these things as we are. Derek and I get along with the guys in the neighboring apartment, who are also graduates of our university. While we don't hang out, we have a friendly relationship where we exchange small talk about sports or chat in the hallway. It's comfortable enough that we can ask each other to keep it down without it being awkward. This brings us to the third incident that happened last Monday. I was alone at the apartment when I bumped into one of the guys from next door. We chatted about football, and then he mentioned that one of the couples in our apartment complex was really into morning intimacy, and the walls were too thin for their liking. I chuckled at the comment because Alexis and I occasionally engaged in morning activities on weekends when we had the place to ourselves. Brooke and Derek typically spent weekends at her parents' house, which was about an hour and a half away. However, as the day went on, I realized that we hadn't engaged in morning activities for about a month, especially on weekends. Instead, it had shifted more towards the evening or not at all. Did he mean on weekdays? It made me uneasy. I considered asking for more details, but the conversation ended, and I felt like I missed my chance. Plus, it's an awkward question, and I might just be overly suspicious. So, here's my dilemma: am I overthinking things? Am I seeing signs that aren't there? Or is something actually going on? And if something is amiss, how should I proceed? I'm hesitant to ask her directly at this point because, for one, I don't want to seem jealous or paranoid if nothing happened. And two, if there is something going on, I don't want them to become more discreet about it. One idea I had was dropping by one of these mornings when they're alone together, but I'm unsure of the right timing. It's a delicate situation, and I'm unsure of how to navigate it without making things worse. If I show up too early or too late, they might become more cautious. Update: most of you recommended that I talk to Brooke and consider walking in on the situation. I decided to do both. Sunday night, everyone was back in the apartment. I had planned to talk to Brooke privately about our neighbor's comment, but before I could, she said something that completely contradicted my theory. She told Derek to go to bed early for work the next morning. What I knew was Derek had a job on campus, but he had always worked night shifts casually. I asked when he started working mornings, and he said he picked up the extra shifts a month ago, starting at 9 a.m. I leave for my day at 7:45 a.m., so it's possible I hadn't noticed. I spent the night trying to figure out if he was lying, if there were still mornings he was at home, or if Alexis might be seeing someone else in the mornings, as some of you suggested. Or maybe I was just being paranoid. I went to bed feeling drained and confused. The next morning, I left for my classes as usual, alternating between wanting to rush home to check on Alexis and thinking I had too much work to chase a theory I wasn't sure about anymore. Eventually, I headed home after my first class. In a strange way, I almost wish I hadn't. When I arrived at the apartment, Derek's car was absent, only Alexis's car was there. My heart raced as I walked to the apartment, not knowing what to expect outside the apartment door. Immediately, I heard a guy's voice from inside, chatting, laughing, and a soft feminine voice responding with giggles. I've seen various reactions to this situation on this subreddit, but I had never thought about what I'd do in such a situation. I pressed my ear to the door, trying to catch their conversation, but I could only make out a word here and there amidst the giggles. Then, I heard Alexis being tickled and shrieking. Maybe I should have waited longer. Looking back, I wish I had. However, as soon as I started fiddling with my keys, it went eerily silent inside. She was with Mark. I hadn't mentioned Mark in my previous post, but he's one of the guys in the apartment next to ours, not the one who initially tipped me off. I never liked Mark, his know-it-all attitude, and his inappropriate comments towards both girls. But I had never suspected this. As soon as I opened the door, both of them looked at me with guilty expressions, dispelling any naive doubts I might have had about the situation being innocent. I had intended to confront them or demand answers, but my eyes welled up with tears, and I didn't want them to see me like that. So, I simply said, "Real nice," and hurried back to my car. I could hear Alexis yelling my name in the hallway, but I didn't stop. I half expected her to chase after me, but when I reached my car, no one was following. I drove to a nearby park and sat there in disbelief. Oddly enough, my initial concern revolved around how my family would react and what explanation I could possibly offer them. My family adored Alexis, often jesting about our future wedding and considering her an integral part of our clan. Following that, I pondered over our living situation, impending exams, and the impracticality of relocating at the moment. Currently entrenched in the competitive application process for a graduate program, I couldn't afford any disruptions, especially of this magnitude. Thankfully, a friend extended the offer of a temporary residence. I've scheduled a time during a lab session to retrieve my belongings from home. Alexis took roughly an hour before bombarding my phone with messages. Initially, she implored me to return home for an explanation, preempting any response from me. Subsequently, she pleaded for my return, citing an anxiety attack, a scenario I had often helped her navigate. Perhaps it's callous of me, but I couldn't help but think, "You brought this upon yourself." Then came a brief pause, followed by her defense, "I don't understand why you're so distrustful. We were simply hanging out." She persisted, "I know it may appear suspicious, but trust me, if our roles were reversed, I'd share your suspicions." However, we weren't engaged in anything inappropriate. He sought advice on relationship matters. "You have to trust me." Honestly, I find her explanations incredulous. Ordinarily, witnessing a cheater's attempts to obscure their actions might have provided a peculiar satisfaction, yet my mind was preoccupied with reminiscing about our shared joyful moments and questioning whether she had been unfaithful even then. I find myself torn between the desire to uncover the beginning of this situation and the worry it brings. It's been ongoing for over a month now, and my suspicions are growing. Later that evening, I received a message from an unfamiliar number, which turned out to be our friendly neighbor. He expressed sincere apologies for what I'm going through, admitting he should have informed me earlier. He had known that his friend was involved with a girl in a relationship but hadn't put two and two together until he learned her name. It seems his earlier comment was his way of dropping a hint, earning him the title of Bro of the Year, in my eyes. As for Derek and Brooke, they seem unaware of this development. I haven't contacted them yet, as I'm struggling to find the right words. I understand that this revelation will have significant implications for our living arrangements and friendships. Perhaps I should reach out to them before Alexis crafts her own version of events. So, it wasn't Derek involved after all, it was one of our neighbors, which came as a surprise. Despite the chaos, the only silver lining is that it appears Obi-Wan is no longer involved with Alexis, and their relationship has ended as it should. However, we can't be entirely certain of this yet. Let's see how things unfold in the next update. Just to clarify the previous update, when I walked in, they weren't literally in the midst of anything, they were simply sitting on the couch looking guilty. Their silence spoke volumes, indicating this wasn't a casual visit scenario. Moving on to the latest update, I've been busy wrapping up the semester and have been following the advice to focus on my studies. I've been spending a lot of time at the library, especially since Alexis doesn't go there. Reflecting on my last update, I realized how foolish it was not to reach out to Derek and Brooke to share my side of the story. I captured a screenshot of the text from the friendly neighbor, ensuring I had a record of it. Just a heads up, I've changed all names except for Marx's, as within moments of receiving the text, Derek began bombarding my phone with calls and messages, clearly unaware of what was happening. Meanwhile, Alexis was desperately reaching out, practically pleading for a meetup. Feeling overwhelmed, I responded to Derek with a brief text, expressing that I wasn't ready to talk, and then set my phone aside for the night. The next morning, I found a text from Derek, inviting me to our favorite restaurant for dinner and drinks, assuring me it would just be the two of us, without Brooke. Despite my diminished appetite due to recent events, the gesture meant a great deal, and I genuinely wanted to reconnect with him. So, after my classes, I headed to the restaurant, my heart racing with anticipation and anxiety, fearing Alexis might somehow be there. Fortunately, she wasn't. When Derek arrived, he greeted me with a warm hug, immediately delving into the situation, asking, "Dude, what's going on?" Now, things take a dramatic turn. Many of you suggested that Brooke might take Alexis's side or had been covering for her all along. I wasn't entirely convinced because although she's closer to Alexis, Brooke and I have been friends for a longer period, which adds another layer of complexity to the situation. Certainly. Derek shared that when he relayed the news to Brooke, she reacted with an intensity that surprised even him. Describing her response, he mentioned feeling a twinge of the desire to confront Alexis himself, but Brooke took charge of the situation with a fierceness that left no room for doubt. As I've mentioned before, Alexis comes from a conservative background, her parents blissfully unaware of our living arrangements. Her apprehensions about their reaction stemmed from the fear of losing their financial support, given their concerns about our relationship potentially affecting her academic pursuits or leading to unplanned consequences. Derek recounted how Brooke stood firm, demanding that Alexis vacate the premises and find a new place to live, or else face the consequences of her actions being revealed to her parents. Later that evening, Derek overheard Alexis's tearful lamentations as she folded a sweater that belonged to me, left behind as a reminder of our shared past. Her cries filled the apartment, only to be met with Brooke's blunt observation when she emerged from her room, "Maybe you shouldn't have left Mark." It's quite ironic to imagine this scenario, considering Brooke's usual demeanor of being no-nonsense and straightforward. None of us expected such a response from her. During our dinner conversation, Brooke's unwavering stance against infidelity struck a chord with me, alleviating any concerns I had about losing my friends. It was a moment of clarity amidst the emotional turmoil. I even managed to enjoy a few bites of sushi, a small victory amidst the chaos. As we parted ways, Derek kindly offered to keep me informed about Alexis's movements, should I decide to return. However, I declined his offer for various reasons. The apartment still holds memories of Alexis, Derek, Brooke, and Mark, and I'm hesitant to confront them alone in that space. Additionally, navigating my emotions as a third wheel in a once-happy dynamic doesn't appeal to me right now, despite their understanding nature. Derek respected my decision but emphasized his availability if I changed my mind, underscoring the strength of our friendship and his willingness to support me through this challenging time. It appears that the rift between Brooke and Alexis has deepened, leading to a significant strain in their friendship. This week has been rather uneventful for me, except for the need to steer clear of any interactions with Alexis. Thankfully, being in a relatively small undergraduate program with only 60 students has its advantages. I enlisted the help of 2 friends, briefing them on the situation, and adopted the strategy of arriving at class just in the nick of time to minimize any potential encounters with her. As far as I know, she only lingered outside one of my classes, prompting a warning message about her emotional state. Upon receiving the message about her presence, I decided to skip that particular class to avoid any awkward confrontations later on. The tension was palpable, and I didn't want to risk exacerbating the situation. Later that evening, I received a lengthy Facebook message from her, detailing the sequence of events from her perspective. Initially, I hesitated to read it, fearing the emotional turmoil it might evoke. However, once I started, I found myself unable to look away. In her message, she recounted instances where he had been overly friendly with her in the corridors, culminating in an unexpected kiss mid-conversation. She expressed remorse for inadvertently leading him on and struggling to rebuff his advances. According to her account, this had occurred on only 3 occasions, each time leaving her feeling deeply uncomfortable and regretful. She concluded by stating her intention to put an end to the situation, acknowledging the need to extricate herself from the uncomfortable dynamic. In the conversation we had when I walked in unexpectedly, she seemed surprisingly understanding of my need for space and time to process everything. She went as far as to promise to make things right by treating me like royalty, insisting that I wouldn't have to lift a finger around the house, no cooking, cleaning, or laundry for me. She even went as far as offering me full access to her phone and passwords, suggesting we install an app called Life 360 to track her whereabouts through her phone. Additionally, she proposed that I sever all ties with Mark and her other male friends, presumably for my peace of mind. Then came the offer of make-up sex, whenever I desired it. Does that sound like a healthy dynamic to you? I was left speechless. There was a part of me that entertained the idea of keeping tabs on her through Facebook, observing the unfolding drama. She was posting melodramatic statuses and song lyrics about mistakes, forgiveness, and some that were related to our shared experiences. However, I recognized the potential danger in becoming obsessively fixated on her social media presence, so I opted to block her instead. A few hours later, I received a text from Derek, informing me that she was distraught, crying and screaming because I had blocked her. On a brighter note, the family I'm staying with has been incredibly welcoming and supportive. Initially, I felt a twinge of guilt about imposing on their hospitality and using their resources, so I offered to contribute financially by paying rent and chipping in for some bills. Despite being currently unemployed, my family provides me with a decent allowance for rent and food. However, they graciously declined my offer, insisting that the first month of my stay is free, and will discuss any further arrangements as needed. They even hinted with a wink that they've hosted friends of their own children who were going through tough times, so they understand. I'm immensely grateful for their kindness and understanding. As for the helpful neighbor, I made sure to express my gratitude to him. He mentioned that Mark has been uncharacteristically quiet lately, and he overheard him telling someone that he had been dumped. Frankly, I don't want to dwell on it. I wanted to make sure Brooke knew how much her support meant to me, so I took the time to compose a heartfelt message thanking her for her decisive action in asking Alexis to leave. Her response, reassuring me that she would have taken the same step regardless of my decision to move back in, brought me a sense of relief. Additionally, her offer to give me a heads up when Alexis was gone so I could retrieve my belongings showed genuine kindness and consideration. In the midst of everything, I found solace in focusing on my studies and preparing for grad school applications. Spending time with the friend I'm staying with also provided a much-needed distraction from the emotional turmoil of recent events. However, I couldn't shake the feeling of apprehension about how my parents would react when I eventually told them about the situation. My mom's tendency to ask countless questions about every detail made me hesitant to broach the topic until after finals were over. Once finals ended, reality hit me like a ton of bricks. It was time to confront the remnants of my relationship with Alexis that lingered in my social media accounts, belongings, and even in the playlists we once shared. Deleting photos, removing items that triggered memories, and scrubbing our songs from my playlist felt like erasing 2 years of shared experiences. It was an emotional process, but I felt compelled to complete it as quickly as possible, hoping to expedite the healing process. A message from a concerned Redditor made me pause and consider the potential emotional toll of recent events on Alexis. Despite the hurt she caused me, I couldn't shake the worry that she might be struggling with her own demons. This prompted me to contemplate the idea of a final conversation, not to reconcile, but to offer closure and perhaps encourage her to seek the help she might need to move forward. My decision to reach out to Alexis for a final conversation was met with surprising receptiveness. She responded promptly, agreeing to meet for a discussion. As I made my way to the designated coffee spot, I grappled with a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a lingering sense of empathy for someone who had once meant so much to me. When I arrived, I found her already seated, her expression a mix of apprehension and remorse. Despite the turmoil within me, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of compassion for the person sitting across from me. As we began to talk, I steered the conversation towards understanding her motivations and offering closure for both of us. I interrupted her, urging her to stop making excuses and to take ownership of her actions, particularly after the incident where he kissed her unexpectedly. The idea of them having sex 3 times seemed implausible to me. She glanced downward, shrugged, and eventually conceded, acknowledging my point. Tears welled up in her eyes as she apologized profusely, expressing deep regret for her actions. Despite my explicit refusal of any possibility of reconciliation, she still held on to a glimmer of hope, asking if there was a chance for us to patch things up. This reaction didn't surprise me, considering our shared history, but I remained firm in my decision, silently shaking my head in response. I suggested that she could continue residing with Derek and Brooke if she wished, but she declined, revealing plans to move in with another friend. Our conversation spiraled into a repetitive cycle, with her attempting to justify her actions by citing difficulties in rejecting advances due to her fear of appearing unfriendly. I pushed back, insisting that this excuse didn't hold water. Despite my efforts to encourage her to acknowledge her role in the demise of our relationship, she remained obstinate. It frustrated me to no end that she refused to let go of this crutch and admit her responsibility for ruining what was once a healthy relationship. Her stubbornness was a trait I had encountered before, whether it was about academic struggles, job searches, or other challenges, she always found someone else to blame. As we parted ways, there was a fleeting moment of hesitation on her part. She reached out as if to say something, but ultimately withdrew, shaking her head before letting go of my hand. Initially, the conversation left me feeling even worse than before, but upon reflection, it served as a stark reminder of her consistent pattern of avoiding responsibility. In the end, it became clear to me that she was never the type of person I wanted to build a future with, regardless of the infidelity. Her unwillingness to take ownership of her actions underscored a fundamental incompatibility that extended beyond the boundaries of our romantic relationship. After the coffee meeting with Alexis, I met up with Derek, and we headed back to the apartment. Brooke was around, but she seemed to keep to herself in her room. We cracked open a few beers, played some video games, and delved into discussions about recent events. Derek confided that they were still struggling to find a suitable third roommate. They weren't keen on the idea of living with complete strangers, and once again, they extended the invitation for me to stay with them. I could sense Derek's earnest desire for me to join them, and feeling guilty about their lease predicament, I agreed. However, I made it clear that I wouldn't move in until Alexis had removed all her furniture and personal belongings. I still couldn't bear the thought of sleeping in the same bed we once shared. Life isn't exactly perfect now, but I'm coping better. Alexis eventually cleared out her things, prompting me to purchase a second-hand bed and dresser from another student. These small changes helped in creating a fresh start for me. Last week marked the beginning of my new round of classes. While it might sound nerdy, I find them genuinely engaging, with hands-on activities and incredibly supportive professors. Derek and Brooke have been pillars of support throughout this ordeal, making me feel like a valued member of their household and not like a third wheel. Although there's still a lingering tension with Mark, I encountered him in the hallway once, and we exchanged cold glances. The urge to confront him was palpable, but I managed to restrain myself. I suppose with time, these feelings will dissipate.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and click on the little bell icon for notifications of new stories.